If there is one thing that I wish was never added to Overwatch 2, it would probably be the scoreboard, or 5v5, either or. But Overwatch 2's scoreboard is just awful. None of the numbers really mean anything at all. Yet people will still try and use the scoreboard all the time to try to justify their own performance or put down others for their performance, when the reality is all the numbers mean nothing because of how the game works. Just to get out of the way, the stats that just mean nothing at all, we have healing. Healing numbers are entirely dependent on how much damage the other team is doing. You can't really make the argument that, oh, I'm not getting healed because our support's healing stat is low. 90% of the time when you're not getting healed, either it's because the support is already healing someone else or because you are completely out of line of sight, either behind a wall or behind a barrier. Because unless damage results in an elimination, almost all damage will inevitably be healed off in some way or another, either by the supports or by health packs, usually by the support heroes. And again, it's a fun statistic to see, which is why I like that they showed it in the first game, but putting it on a public scoreboard just leads to people trying to, blame and solve issues based on the numbers on the board, when the numbers on the board kind of mean absolutely nothing at all. That's why you will see screenshots of people losing games yet having, double the eliminations of the other team, because the numbers just don't really matter. What matters is progress on the objective and how you play the game. The next useless stat is damage mitigated. Again, like healing, it's another stat that's fun to look at and see what it is and be like, damn, I mitigated 15,000 damage this game. That's pretty cool, but it also just kind of means nothing at all. You never look at the damage mitigated and be like, damn, our Reinhardt isn't mitigating enough damage. He's gotta hold up the barrier harder. Because normally having less damage mitigated is a good thing. It means that your Reinhardt is being aggressive and actually trying to deal damage, as opposed to being very passive and holding up his barrier. The real indication that your Reinhardt would be through his death number, but we're not talking about that yet. And then the last basically useless number on the scoreboard is for assist, because unlike normal first-person shooter games, you do not get an assist for dealing damage to a target but not getting the killing blow on them. That just counts as getting an elimination in Overwatch 2. So what does getting an assist mean? The fuck if I know. Generally, two things will trigger getting an assist: either using some form of crowd control ability on the target, such as knockback, or inflicting some kind of status effect on them or the person who killed them, such as damage boosting as Mercy, having a Orb of Discord on them as Zen, or having them be hacked, antied, hindered, anything like that will usually result in the participating hero getting an assist. So what do assists mean for the total state of the game and how your match is going? The answer is absolutely nothing. Assist, healing, damage mitigation, 3 out of the 6 numbers that they give you on the scoreboard mean absolutely nothing. And the rest of them aren't really that useful either. Starting up with damage, which is the stat I think is the most misleading out of all of them. I feel like a big factor of the DPS support situation that was happening was people looking at the scoreboard and the damage numbers and seeing like, wow, that's really high. But the weird thing is that the more damage that a hero does, the less damage that they will have in a game. This is mainly just because if you deal damage faster, you will just eliminate a target. You will easily outpace any healing or support the target gets and kill them with a minimal amount of damage dealt. Meanwhile, if your hero has a very low damage output, they could potentially just be firing at a target for a full minute and just never get the kill, just farming up damage infinitely. And a lot of the heroes involved in this kind of fake damage phenomenon are Sigma, Moira, and Illari. If anyone has played a game of a Sigma, normally Sigma will by far has the most damage in the lobby. So what do you think his damage per second output is? He can't get critical hits, so is it 150? Maybe it's 200, like Roadhog? Nope. Sigma's damage per second through his primary fire is 73.3. Easily one of the lowest damage per second outputs in the entire game. Now, the reason why Sigma will have so much damage is exactly because he just deals damage constantly while almost never killing anything on his own. Sigma's rock is basically the only way that he's able to confirm kills, because his burst damage is pretty decent. He just has a very long recovery time between using his primary, so his overall damage per second is just low. It's actually really funny because Brig is one of the strongest supports right now, mainly because he's good against almost every tank that's strong right now, including Sigma. Brig is straight up one of the best supports to play into a Sigma, not accounting for, you know, the DPS picks that the other team has, mainly because a solo Brig can actually wall off a Sigma completely. The only way Sigma has to confirm a kill is stunning a target with Rock and then following up with damage. Brig has a barrier that can block Rock. Rock also has a massive windup to it. It is very easy to just go in as Brig and just completely wall off a Sigma with your barrier. He just does not have the damage output to get through it in a reasonable amount of time. In the long run, if it's a true 1v1, and both heroes have full health, then like, yeah, Sigma still probably wins. But Brig can hold her own for a very long time against a Sigma, long enough for her team to go in and win the fight and then come back to help her. Illari is another hero that kind of falls victim to the same thing. Her damage output is only 75 damage per second. If you count for critical hits, then it still only goes up to 107.5 because she has a reduced critical hit multiplier. But what she does have is a decent amount of range and basically the ability to freely go and fire at people because she can just place down Pylon, and Pylon is her primary way of healing. And then of course Moira is basically the queen of highly inflated damage and healing stats because she's just Moira. That's kind of what she does. She just throws out an ability that does a guaranteed 200 damage to random people on an 8-second cooldown. Her secondary fire only deals 50 damage per second, but it hits through a lot of defensive abilities and is very easy to hit. Even her ultimate Coalescence doesn't deal that much damage. It only deals 70 damage per second. It's just good in that it also provides healing and also pierces through any enemy or ally to deal damage and healing to multiple people at the same time. In a single 1v1, it still takes her a full 3 seconds to actually kill anyone, assuming that they don't get any healing at all. I've heard a lot of people refer to Moira's stats as being fake damage and fake healing, which is kind of true, but also basically every form of damage and healing in the game are fake. And the same thing kind of goes for Eliminations as well. It's a bit more stable as a thing to measure performance by, but you get an elimination just by dealing any damage at all to a target within a few seconds of them being killed. Which is again how Moira just has a massively inflated elimination stat, usually the highest on the entire team, because he just throws out the orb that does 200 damage to a bunch of random people, and then if any of them happen to die, then she gets an elimination for it. She deals 20 damage to someone just to get more healing resource, she gets elimination credit for that. The stat just doesn't mean anything. It's also a factor that some characters are just much better at dealing group damage than characters that deal single target damage. Having a statistic like, you know, final blows would have actually been useful to see if someone's actually finishing off kills or getting kills on their own versus just dealing damage to a bunch of people but never actually confirming a kill on any of them. And even then, it's hard to say because sometimes you will just have a DPS duo that specializes in doing that. A hero like a Genji is great at confirming kills because Switch Strike deals 50 damage and also resets its cooldown upon getting an elimination, meaning a Genji can easily go and finish off a low health enemies if someone calls it off, and still have his cooldown to use it again to do the same thing 2 seconds later. But I've seen so many people try and use, you know, the numbers as a reason to put players down or try and solve what's happening with your team comp, but none of it means anything. If you want to fix what's happening with your team comp, you need to look at what is happening in a fight and address it. The numbers won't tell you anything. Just to go over some random screenshots and talk about how useless the numbers are. On this map, our DPS numbers are basically similar to each other. The only difference is that our tank is living through the fights, meaning that we inevitably win them and get progress on the objective, because as you can see at the top, we are at 117 meters while the other team is at 33. Even though if you look at the eliminations and the damage, they look pretty similar. Of course, our team has slightly more damage, but like, hey, you'd probably expect this to be much closer than the actual result in game is. Again, with this control map on Antarctic Peninsula, we have Zen Moira. Our healing output is incredibly low compared to the other teams, but we still have very minimal deaths aside from our Doomfist. The main reason the enemy team has more healing than us is because we have substantially more damage than them with our support lineup. On this Gibraltar game, after round 1, we had Emongg on our team. I think we did actually fumble this pretty hard and lose though. But you can see my damage on Zen is 1000 and has 7 elims, while the other Zenyatta has almost 2000 damage. Since usually when I was able to deal damage to someone who overextended to try and kill me, or cleaning up after a fight, it usually always resulted in getting a kill. Kind of the same with this King's Row game. If you just look at the right 3 numbers, our stat lines look pretty similar. Ours is of course a bit higher, but not by too much. And then you look at the eliminations, assists, and death, and it's a completely different story. Same with the Rialto game. Our Widow has 5 eliminations and has almost the lowest damage on the team, because they were mainly going for eliminations, especially on the enemy team's Widowmaker. And this isn't even just a Widowmaker thing. If you wanted to grind up damage on Widowmaker, you definitely could just by firing at the tank over and over and over again. You could also grind up eliminations by just randomly body-shotting different targets over and over again and letting other people actually finish off the kills. But neither of those are really the best way to play Widowmaker. The best way to play with Widowmaker is to try and deal with the biggest threat on the enemy team, and try and get single eliminations, and try and get a pick to start off a fight. But doing that properly will usually result in you having a lower stat line than someone who either just blindly fired into the enemy tank or just kept body-shotting people over and over again, picking a different target each time. In this Blizzard World screenshot from a different account is another good example of how healing and damage just kinda don't mean that much. The other team was able to grind up a lot of damage because I was just pocketing the Roadhog, and now I was able to grind up a lot of healing because they would just shoot at the Roadhog and never kill him. He has 4 deaths for the game. The numbers just kind of don't mean anything at all. It's also like this Eichenwald game. Our Sig is 0 and 2, but he's doing excellent. He's basically hard-walling the enemy team and keeping them occupied, while our Echo is able to go in and get kills for free. May is able to get a wall off. Sir, we maybe could have done a better job of keeping him alive, but he wasn't playing bad. He was just doing his role as the Sigma of just completely walling off the enemy team while the DPS go and get all the kills and win the fight. And that's kind of a good segue into the last statistic that means nothing, which is deaths. Mainly because having more deaths can be a very good thing in Overwatch. The game is not based on who gets the most kills, it's whoever makes the most progress on the objective. If you're playing for your life and playing very cowardly and not going in and not taking these fights confidently and trying to get a kill, you're not going to win a fight. You're just going to make it last longer while giving the enemy team free time on the objective. A team that goes fully balls in every single time together and just dies and takes 3 fights in 2 minutes and wins the last one is going to make the same amount of progress as a team that plays very carefully and doesn't die, but takes a very slow fight that they win, but the fight is 2 minutes long. However, these 2 different playstyles will result in very different amounts of eliminations, deaths, etc. for the 2 teams using them. And there's also other times where it's just better to die on the objective. If your team loses a fight, not only is it safer usually to just die on the objective, sometimes it's just objectively the better play. If you are a fast character like Tracer, you can get out, but you could also stall the objective for an additional 2 to 3 seconds so that your slower teammates who are respawning are able to get back to the fight, and you'll have a bit more time for them to get there and set up, while you on Tracer are able to get back faster than them just because you have the mobility to do so. Just to tie up this long rant, I do not like the scoreboard system. I don't think it matters for any games. Any problems, you just have to analyze what is happening rather than looking at the scoreboard, and that will actually cue you into what's happening. Sometimes things can be a good look in the right direction, like if your Ana has 19 deaths, maybe you need to go and protect them from the Tracer that's killing them over and over again, but that's something you have to find out through gameplay for yourself. You can't just look at the scoreboard and diagnose everything. It's also worth considering if you do dedicate a DPS to going and fighting the enemy Tracer off, those 2 heroes are going to get basically no damage and no eliminations because they're just both going to be keeping each other in check, and sometimes that is the best strategy to go for. Just to say, hey, you, go just fuck around with the other team's best player and make sure they can't do anything, and then we're gonna win the 4v4 now that their best player is preoccupied. That is a game-winning strategy, and it results in 2 players just not having very high numbers because they're just both doing the proper play of distracting the best player on the enemy team, making sure that they can't get any picks and that your team can win the fight because of that. So yeah, if you watched this far into this video, thank you for watching. This is kind of a prelude to I want to talk about why tank is dead, why the role is not fun anymore, and also the problem with DPS supports and how they are not real, and what impact in the game actually is. But I feel like this is a very big topic that ties into a lot of that to get into, because way too many people just use the scoreboard as justification for anything and everything, and the numbers just don't mean anything. You want to make it useful, you could include stuff that could actually matter, like, you know, objective time, final blows, just making the assist system actually mean something, and having it be if you get the final blow, you only get an elimination, and if you dealt damage but didn't get the final blow, you just get an assist. Because currently, assist just does not mean anything. You may as well just remove it from the game, it just doesn't mean anything. You just do that one thing to the system, you could actually use the numbers to very easily try and figure out, like, where are we going wrong with our playstyle? Our Widow is not getting any final blows, she's not getting criticals, she's just, you know, hitting people with body shots and letting someone else finish out the kill. We should probably just switch to a character that's better at doing that, like a Junkrat with random spam grenades. I don't know, this has been too long. Goodbye, thank you for watching. Subscribe, maybe, please.